you know me, you know that the Xiaomi Mi 10T is one of my favorite phones and I've been using it as a daily driver for a year now. But it's got some nibbling problems that keep it from being a truly great value for money smartphone. And fixing those problems is the Xiaomi 11T Pro. And yes, the Mi moniker is no longer part of the naming conventions as per Xiaomi's new branding direction. This phone is priced at 2,099 ringgit. So it's a small bump up over the Mi 10T Pro, which cost below 2,000 ringgit when it launched. So for that small bump up in price, is it worth it to get the 11T Pro, or should you just spend less money and get the 10T Pro, especially since after a year now, the retail price has dropped quite significantly? Let's find out in our comparison.
Before we get started, here's a quick word about Good Deals by KLGG, our official e-store. You can buy all sorts of awesome gadgets here at great prices, and you can even get 10 ringgit off on your first purchase with a minimum spend of 100 ringgit. You can also pay via 3-month 0% installments using IOU Pay or Atom. Visit the link in the description box below to start shopping. The first thing I want to get off my chest after using the Mi 10T Pro for so long is how thick and heavy the phone is. It weighs 218 grams and is 9.3mm thick. Thankfully, the 11T Pro addresses this as it's 14 grams lighter and 5mm thinner. On paper, that may not seem like a lot of difference, but in reality, the 11T Pro is easier to hold with one hand, carry around, and put on your car phone holders. In terms of aesthetics, they are fairly similar. The 11T Pro now has a wider camera module and a thinner camera bump. Both phones have a curved back panel and are really good looking phones. Moving on to the displays, the Mi 10T Pro only sports an LCD panel, while the 11T Pro comes with an AMOLED display. And of course, the obvious difference between the two is that the 11T Pro offers more vibrant colors and has a higher peak brightness. On top of that, there's also support for Dolby Vision on the 11T Pro, which I like to use for watching Netflix. Both pack a 6.67-inch panel, however the Mi 11T Pro uses Corning Gorilla Glass Victus protection, which is the strongest piece of glass you can get on a smartphone right now. The Mi 10T Pro uses Corning Gorilla Glass 5, which isn't too bad either. The Mi 10T Pro gets plus points for offering 144Hz refresh rate, while the 11T Pro only comes with 120Hz refresh rate. To be fair, however, neither showed any notable difference with web and social media scrolling, and it's the same when it comes to gaming as well, especially since there aren't enough interesting games out there that utilize high refresh rate displays. Both phones come with a set of stereo speakers, but the 11T Pro speakers are tuned by Harman Kardon and the phone has support for Dolby Atmos. The difference in audio quality between the two phones are night and day. The 11T Pro offers much more depth and clarity thanks to a more defined soundstage, but that's not to say the Mi 10T Pro is bad. In fact, you still get crisp, loud audio with decent balance. The 11T Pro just takes things up several notches, and I much prefer watching videos and movies on this. Speaking of audio, we were sent this review unit of the 11T Pro together with the Redmi Buds 3 Pro. I initially thought it was one of those cheap earbuds that come bundled with new phones. It costs just 239 ringgit after all, but to my surprise, this is actually one of the best earbuds of 2021. It impressed me with its great audio quality, ANC and battery life. So trust me, this is not a sponsored section. I'm adding this into the video because I genuinely think it's really that good. You can read my full review of the Buds 3 Pro through the link in the description box below. Moving on, let's talk about the cameras. Here are the specs, and here are the photo samples. As per Xiaomi's usual imaging conventions, daytime photos show high color saturation. Interestingly, however, the 10T Pro's picture is the more natural looking of the two. Both phones had AI disabled. With that said, the 11T Pro's images look slightly sharper and brighter. When it comes to high-res photography, they both offer pretty sharp images as expected, but the 11T Pro overexposes the background in this shot of the shrub. In this picture of the alleyway, the differences aren't so clear, but the 11T Pro delivers more details when you look at the ground. Moving on to portrait mode, both phones offer great looking bokeh, but the 11T Pro takes the cake with a brighter image. Same goes for the human portraits, and you really do see the oversaturated colors on the 11T Pro here. When it comes to nighttime photography, the 11T Pro wins out again with a brighter and clearer image. Both phones took about the same time to shoot, so the 11T Pro clearly wins out in this area. In terms of videography, both phones can shoot at 8K 30fps. The videos from both phones are quite similar in quality, perhaps the Mi 10T Pro's is overexposed a tad bit. But there isn't too much of a difference. What really sets the two apart in this area is the 11T Pro's set of AI movie effects that you can use to create cinematic videos and short films. I demonstrated how it worked in a previous video and you can check it out through the link in the description box below. Next, let's talk about performance, and here are the specs. The 11T Pro of course comes with the much more powerful Snapdragon 888, while the 10T Pro comes with a Snapdragon 865. Let's get synthetic benchmarks out of the way first. The 11T Pro outperforms its cousin on 3D Mark's Wildlife by some margin, with a score of 5,551, and it's the same on Wildlife Extreme. Over on PC Mark, the 11T Pro scores nearly 1,500 points more than the Mi 10T Pro. When it comes to gaming, both phones can run well-optimized titles like Call of Duty Mobile without too much hassle. Both phones had high graphics on with maximum frame rates, and the phones got pretty smooth performance with the occasional dip in frames. When it comes to Genshin Impact, we see more of a difference. The 11T Pro was able to hold steadier frame rates in different scenarios compared to the Mi 10T Pro, while on the high graphics preset and 60fps mode turned on. I also wanted to make use of the high refresh rate displays on both phones, so I tried out Modern Combat Versus. I don't think this is the most graphically impressive game, but it still looks decent. Both phones ran the game just fine with the frame cap unlocked. After a while of gaming, I find that the 10T Pro heats up faster than the 11T Pro, and I suppose that's down to the phone's liquid cooling system that you'll find on the latter, even though it has a chipset that's notorious for its overheating issues. I never really got too uncomfortable when gaming on either phones, and that's mainly because of the phone cases I put on that help protect my fingers a little bit as well. When it comes to battery life, both phones sport a 5000 mAh battery, and they both can last me an entire day with heavy gaming and general use. But the Mi 10T Pro edges out with maybe an extra 10 to 15% left of battery life at the end of the day compared to its younger cousin. But to make up for that, the 11T Pro actually supports a whopping 120 watts of fast charging, and the 120 watts adapter actually comes in a box. Xiaomi claims that you can charge up the phone to full in just 17 minutes, and in our experience it took a little bit longer at around 22 minutes or so, but that's still a fraction of the time needed to charge the 10T Pro with its 33 watts of charging.
So with all that said, the 11T Pro blows the Mi 10T Pro out of the water thanks to its wide plethora of upgrades across the board. It's got a nicer AMOLED display, it's more powerful, it's got really great Harman Kardon speakers, and I appreciate that it's now thinner and lighter than its predecessor as well. And on top of that, the 11T Pro also supports that really quick 120 watts of fast charging that I mentioned earlier. But that's not to say that the Mi 10T Pro is a bad phone, because it has been my daily driver for 1 year after all. And you can definitely get the Mi 10T Pro from anywhere between 1,500 ringgit to about 1,900 ringgit, with a lot of bundle deals that you can find on official retailers right now on Shopee or Lazada. The 11T Pro, however, will still cost you its retail price of 2,099 ringgit, like I mentioned earlier. So if you're really looking to save a buck, the Mi 10T Pro is still a decent option if you're going for something really powerful, decent display, battery life and all that. But the amount of upgrades that you get on the 11T Pro is very difficult to ignore, especially if you have some cash to spare. And if you do, I would suggest you go for the 11T Pro. So that's it for my comparison video today. Let us know down in the comment section below if you agree with what I'm saying. Let us know which would you pick, the 10T Pro or 11T Pro. This is Victor signing off. Until next time, bye bye.